Episode 60, Gospel Diaries. Pastor Terrence Kennedy.
All right, what's up, Gospel Diaries? Listen, I'm still at it. I'm in, what city is this?
This is Harlem. You're in Harlem.
Harlem, in Harlem. Could you believe it? Gospel Diaries is in Harlem. Wonderful Pastor Terrence Kennedy.
God bless you. I'm good, man. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Listen, I had reached out to Anthony Morgan before I came here, and I was like, man, you got any suggestions? Anybody hot? Anybody vibrant or whatever? And the first name he gave me was Pastor Terrence Kennedy.
That was nice of him.
So that's why we're here.
I'm glad. Thank you.
And I'm honored to be here, and I'm learning so much about you, and it's fascinating. For one, I walked in here and saw a picture of you and Vicki Winans. She's on your record.
The group
I
have is Pastor Terrence Kennedy and the Reach Music Ministry.
Mm-hmm.
The group kind of formulated after 2014 by accident. Right, I kind of never really wanted a group. I kind of always, growing up, of course I was in music ministry in church, and I studied music in school and stuff, but I kind of helped groups. I sang in a few groups, but never really wanted my own group. And I think the testament is that as most people that have choirs and most people that have groups, when you ask them, they've had a group since they were like knee high, right? So, but what happened was I recorded my first project. Like the Lord had really pushed me to step out on faith and record this first project. And from that, like all kinds of favor happened with that first project. So it occurred to me afterwards, like after I had a project, like, you need someone to sing these songs now. So that's how the group kind of formed, and it was kind of organic from some of the participants on that first project. Because that first project was, a lot of those people didn't even live in the States. It was an international choir.
What year?
That was 2014.
And then did you release it the same year?
We recorded it live at Symphony Space here in New York, and we released it 2015 because it was about a year to 9 months to a year of post-production stuff. So we released it the following year. But the truth is, it was an act of faith. It wasn't like I was just not. I was pastoring. I was traveling a lot, and the Lord was dealing with me. I had some questions for God about ministry, and I remember in one of my prayer times, the Lord had kind of challenged me or rebuked me and said that I had not been a good steward. And when that first came into my spirit, honestly, I didn't fully know the revelation of that. I didn't understand it, because to hear that, I was really connecting it to giving, to serving, and I've been in church all my life, right? I give all my life, so I didn't really understand it. But when the Lord began to deal with me about it, it was that I was really doing nothing with the music that I wrote.
To go around and to ask, hey, excuse me, can you sing this? Can I record you singing this, or whatever the case may be? And one time, because I had asked one of my friends, I was like, can you sing this song I wrote? And he was like, man, why should I sing it? You need to just do it yourself. So, you know what I'm saying? Everyone has that story behind, recording. They should at least have a story. And it meant something to me, because I'm sitting up here asking someone to do something that God has already, enabled me to do. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and I think for me, it was, I really didn't take a lot of those gifts that I had that seriously. And I remember, in fact, I just said to the Lord something, when this whole thing recording, because you're going to record, it's a big leap of faith, because I started just with a kind of, okay, God, yes, Lord. Mm-hmm. I didn't start with knowing budget, knowing what it's going to entail, really. And, there's a big difference. I had worked on other people's recording. I have vocal coached other groups. I had never been in the production chair for my own recording. There's a big difference in driving a car and riding in an Uber.
Uh-oh.
Right? So up until then, I was the Uber passenger. And so this, I had a lot to learn quickly. And the first one, I didn't know what I was doing, a lot of it. It was really, but it was more so the Lord testing me, and from a result of that, like all kinds of favor and connection happened. Then I remember I was telling the Lord that I really wasn't, I thought my songs, like, why am I recording these songs? Mm-hmm. And I was shocked, because what came to my spirit again was that when I tell God that I didn't like something, I wasn't really criticizing me, I was really criticizing him. Participated in music ministry in church. I come from a singing family, and so I've always either sang or directed the choir or something like that. Then from there, being a graduate of Music and Art High School, that's where I got a lot of shaping and exposure to a lot of different kinds of music. Growing up in church, I heard my taste and my ear was infiltrated with the sounds of gospel, but I always had a passion towards other music too, but just didn't know how to explore it. I knew I liked it, but really didn't know. But studying music in school put me on a curriculum and on a path to learn, and I had wonderful teachers at the school, and we were surrounded every day by extremely gifted people that were diverse in their talents, and diverse in their abilities. And I think that some days learning was so much fun in music and art. Some days I think learning was an accident. A lot about the technicalities of the voice, and I learned a lot about different genres of music, and how to approach different genres of music. And that kind of started me on a path with working with choirs, working with group, working with soloists. I always loved theater.
What are some of those groups and choirs that you...
A lot of them were abroad, because I lived in I lived in Japan for a number of years, and I have 2 churches in Japan. So when I first started, a lot of that happened abroad. Then I did some, like I would get invited to local community choirs, which we don't have a lot of community choirs anymore. But the other fun thing about community choirs was when I was a teenager, their rehearsals were open. So you would go to a community choir rehearsal and it was packed, like it was a service. But people were just there to enjoy listening to either new songs or so I moved to Japan in 1998.
Japan.
I moved to Japan, and that's like a whole nother long story. I lock, stock, barrel moved to Japan in 1998, and I went there. A lot of people don't know because people know that I go to Japan. That's not what they know that, but they don't know that I really went there working for the Japanese consulate under the Ministry of Education, right?
Okay.
And that was really a door the Lord opened for me just to get into that country. But the scripture talks about you shall be my witnesses in Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, and to the othermost parts of the earth. And that's exactly how ministry started for me in terms of overseas. Because when I was in New York, I had an all Japanese choir, right? And that was unheard of at that time. That was absolutely unheard of because at that time, particularly in Harlem, and this is, way before 9/11, Harlem, a particular thing in Harlem was there was a lot of tourism on Sundays. So they would come to the church, to different churches, they would hear the choirs. Afterwards, they would eat a soul food dinner somewhere, and that was kind of thing. So from that, I had met a group of Japanese tourists, and they had wanted to learn the gospel. And for me, when I started that, I heard that, and I heard the ministry aspect of that. There was no business deal. I just said, sure, I'll teach you, right? And so I started teaching them the gospel and gospel music, obviously. A lot of them were not, none of them at that time were Christian, none of them. And then, but that was kind of like my being a witness right here in my Jerusalem, learning how to teach them here. So I had kind of a lot of tools under my belt so that when I moved to Japan, I had been working for Japanese people for quite a few years. I had specifically Japanese people. So when I got this job offer to go and work at, through the Ministry of Education over there, the ministry started for me because by that point, I think some of the people that I had worked with had relocated back to Japan, and they contacted me. And so I lived in a very rural part of Japan. I lived in southern Japan, but they lived in the cities, Osaka and Tokyo. So a lot of my correspondence was traveling from where I lived to fly to Osaka, fly to Tokyo, and I started doing workshops and concerts. And at that time, it was brand new in that like if you go to Japan now, there are thousands of gospel choirs. There were none at that time. There were very few. They were mostly attracted to gospel largely through the movies, particularly Sister Act and the Blues Brothers. Some of them had seen gospel tours or gospel plays that had gone through the area. It was less than 1% Christian, so there were not a lot of churches. So in my early stages, we would rehearse in bars and in clubs because that was the space that was really available to us. I started doing prayer services and Bible study, and the Bible study was allowed because, and I say allowed because, they were not there they liked the music. They were not there to find God but I would teach the Bible studies kind of like in a historical context because my reasoning with them was, well, you can't understand gospel music if you know nothing about the Bible. So I would prepare Bible lessons based upon whatever I was teaching to show that gospel songs have roots in Scripture, have a context. Slowly but surely, one by one, people started giving their lives to the Lord. And then while I was there was a school that was opened up, and I was the first teacher for the school. It was funded, I think it's still going on. It was funded through the Blue Note. The Blue Note, the jazz club funded the school. been to Japan more times than I can count. I mean, and people know it now because of social media. You know, there was a time that we can go in and out the country and no one knew what we were doing. Which I say, sometimes I want the Lord to bring back the days because, you know, sometimes I was used to just going in and out but now everyone knows what you're doing and I, you know, sometimes you just you feel, do you really want everyone to know like every move you're making, or do you want everyone to know that his apartment is vacant for 2 weeks, you know? so that's just what
it can be a gift and a curse.
It can be, yeah. So, yeah, but those were the very
nosy people.
For nosy people, right? And I preach with a translator.
Okay.
That's, you know, I can speak some conversational Japan. I can get, when I'm there, I can go out and get along by myself. I'm not trying to preach in Japanese.
Okay.
That's very difficult because for a lot of reasons. One, there are Christian concepts or Christian words that don't naturally exist in their language.
Right.
So you kind of need a very skilled translator. And what I've learned by trial and error, you need not just a translator, you really need a saved translator if you're going to do ministry. There are a lot of wonderful, professional, very skilled translators out there. But if the translator doesn't believe what you're saying, they're translating it in doubt. And they'll say something like, well, what he's saying is, instead of saying, so if I said, Jesus loves you, they can translate me to say, well, he said, but you see how they just dissociate, or, you know, and I would have like conversations with translators because the more I lived there, the more I learned the language and the more I began to pick up on the language. There have been instances where I have stopped the translator and said, that is not what I just said. Because they just, like, for example, I've been in situations where I was someplace preaching and the translator was not Christian, they were excellent, but they wouldn't want to say Jesus. So whenever I said Jesus, they would translate higher power.
Wow.
Right? Yeah. And so I would stop and say, that's not what I just said. You know, so, so when I do go there, if I preach, I'm definitely preaching with a translator. But if I'm doing workshops, depends on where it is, but usually I can get by without a translator. It's always easier, but usually with workshops I can get away because workshops the pace is slower. That's what I want to say. It's a teaching environment, right? So the pace is slower. They have time to hear you. You have time to explain, and I can. You know, I do it both in a broken Japanese and English. So that, but preaching and in-service stuff, it's the more, you know, you're on the express train with that. So doesn't know institutional.
Well,
if someone said they don't know of institutional, check their fever, check their pulse, and ask them, where were you? Very different New York than I grew up in. There was a lot more fellowshipping between churches, a lot more fellowshipping. So Institutional was known for their broadcast, and many people from all the boroughs came there. They were not members there, but just came there for that. But I think also Brooklyn had a lot of choirs. You know, Brooklyn had Triborough at that time, who was Bishop Albert Jamieson. But Harlem also had, Harlem was known, we had strong, what's the word I want to say? Harlem had strong church choirs, not so many, like the community, like when I'm thinking as a kid, New York City Community Choir came out of Harlem, but we had strong church choirs, and we had, you know, that, and Brooklyn had, you traveled to Brooklyn for their strong community choirs, and so you're absolutely institutional. They were definitely trailblazers. They absolutely had presence.
All right. Well, look, Pastor Kennedy, what I wanted to do, honestly, I wanted to introduce you to the Gospel Diaries.
I'm glad you did, man.
And then look at it. we now have another piece of your history that's
Thank you.
available to people, and I think that this is going to be great. Follow him on social media.
Yep, I'm
follow
on
the music.
Facebook, on Instagram. The first project you were talking about is Pastor Terrence Kennedy and the Reach Week International Mass. And then the second project that's out, Pastor Beverly Crawford's on that project. Right. I did a duet with Pastor Beverly Crawford on my second project. So that's this journey. On that first project also, Melanie Daniels is on it. Right. And there's a video check out the video on YouTube. We did it. You know Mel?
Man, I love that woman. What are you talking
Who
about?
doesn't, Mel? Who doesn't?
Man, I got some homework to do.
But
Hey, you do too. Is that okay? You got anything else to say?
No. I think you said. I'm thankful. I'm grateful, and I'm thank you for coming by to talk to me. And I hope we can do it again.
Oh, we will. And as I say, Gospel Diary, always love on someone and change a life. You never.
Definitely, a translator is